In Melbourne, I used to hang around an all-night eatery. It was called the Pieteria, under the elevated railway. And there were a lot of homosexuals in there, and I was afraid of the butch ones. But one night I met a nice feminine kid, and he told me that I could get a job where he worked at Mont Park Mental Hospital. So next morning I became a psychiatric nurse. I forged a reference to get it, and I worked at the extremely catatonic ward of the old Mont Park Mental Hospital. We worked 12-hour shifts and we received no training, and they let us rent a room for the staff at the hospital. And half the patients, there were 20 patients in my ward, and all day they sat and rocked back and forth, listening to pop music that was piped into the ward. But I had to bathe them and wipe their bum occasionally and feed them by spoon. The pay was fantastic, but I made the mistake of trying to communicate with them via telepathy, because I'd read a book by Carlos Castaneda that started me thinking about stuff like that. So after straining my mind beam, I got paranoid that they were pretending to be catatonic and were secretly planning to kill me, because I alone had found out they were telepathically talking to one another and planning to take over the hospital. So after 6 weeks, I sneaked out at lunchtime before they had time to read my mind, and I got a train to Sydney. And years later, someone in Melbourne told me that the staff had searched the grounds thinking that I'd been bumped off by a nutcase and buried on the hospital grounds somewhere. Okay. Back in Sydney, in Surrey Hills, I saw some bums that I hadn't seen at the other soup kitchen gathered in an alley behind the Commonwealth Street Church, which had "God is Love" plastered all over it. It's now a mosque in 2024, but back then, every Thursday and Sunday at 6 p.m, a door opened and about 40 men and 4 women, because I think there was only 4 homeless ladies on the streets of Sydney back then. That's all I ever saw. We were served an excellent meal. Those with the tolerance to sit through a Baptist prayer service afterwards got extra cake. Seems like only old folk were bums back then. I saw no other homeless kids my age. Now, I found another soup kitchen at Circular Quay in another back alley off Phillip Street. It was behind the Catholic St Vincent de Paul soup kitchen. It was the St Vincent de Paul. Different bums and a few who'd gone to Kent Street gathered, and St Vinny's served daily at 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. a mediocre but appreciated soup that smelt like a cup of tea, and a cup of tea that smelt like soup. And a bloke complained, "There's no meat in the soup today." And someone yelled, "You're lucky. Those who got some yesterday are in the morgue now." He got a few laughs. One morning at the soup kitchen at Kent Street, Fagan stepped out of Dickens' novel Oliver Twist and limped into my life. He looked about 75 years old, his clothes were third hand, and a big Hessian sack hung over his shoulder. He seemed very well known. Some men joked with him, and one deliberately snubbed him, and another sneered, "Dirty old poofter." Fagan laughed it off. He sat down and ate with enthusiasm. He was fascinatingly grotesque, and I watched him from the corner of my eye. Staring was unwise. It could lead to violence. He finished his meal and he slunk towards me and offered his hand. And he said, "My name's Jack McCarthy. Haven't seen you here before." His large hooked nose was pockmarked and his handshake lingered long and squeezed hard. And I thought, he's a puff. I hope no one watching thinks that I'm his bum boy. I told him my name was Paul McKnight. It just popped into my head. I projected super ultra butch and tried to appear dismissive in case people were watching. Jack chatted about some South versus Manly rugby league game and how I could listen to it on his excellent radio. He put out an offer. "I live in a big house with lots of rooms. Other boys live there as well. You can stay if you need a place and do a few odd jobs around the house. Are you on the dole? You can have your cheque sent to my place. Gee, you're a very nice boy, I can tell." I took his offer. If it was a ruse to get in my arse, I'd just piss off. He wouldn't be difficult to escape from, and it would be great to have an address, a postal address, so I could get dole money via a cheque. We took off through the city streets, and despite his limp, he kept a fast pace. At Darlinghurst, he threw me a sack. "Get empties. The bottle-o gives halfpenny for beer, threepence for lolly water, and sixpence for big screw tops. You can make good money from collecting bottles." We searched laneways and plucked bottles from backyards. I hope no girls saw me scrounging bottles, but by the time we got to Crown Street, our sacks were full. Fagan's place, 560 Crown Street, was a run-down double-storey joint terrace house next to an alley in Surrey Hills. The small backyard was overgrown with weeds, and next to a wall was a battered coffin with no lid. We climbed up rickety stairs and hid our bottles under some garbage. Jack said, "Bastards will pinch whatever's not nailed down." And he fished around in 4 layers of clothes for his bundle of keys, unlocked a door and ushered me in. He opened a blind and I saw the room had a table, 2 chairs and a mantel radio. He said, "Sit down, that chair's the best. You boys like the radio, don't you?" He turned it on, and Frank Ifield's song, "I remember you, you're the one who said I love you true, yes you did, didn't you know?" That song spread out as Fagan tidied up newspapers and strewn clothing, and he offered me tobacco from a tin. And he said, "It's flake. You rub it between your palms." I rubbed it and then rolled expertly, and I said, "No worries, I know flake. Thanks, mate." Fagan Jack lit it for me. And he joked, "It sounded like you said you're a snowflake." And I said, "I ain't no snowflake, Jack. Remember that." And he said, "I bet you'd like a nice cup of tea. I'll get some water." He went down the stairs and I looked around my new home. The single mattress smelt musty, but the pile of old blankets smelt okay. And a garbage bin just smelt. I thought, bugger this joint. It's only 1 room. The city mission would be better than this. "Where are the other boys," he said, "live here? I'm going to split." Fagan came back with a saucepan of water and lit a gas ring. And he said, "I pay the bastards £4 a week for this and I don't even have an inside tap," he moaned. The door banged open and 3 teenagers burst in. The biggest one looked at me and whispered in Jack's hairy ear. Jack said, "Boys, this is Paul. He's staying with us for a while." We'll call him Big Paul." And he pointed to a small kid and said, "We've already got a little Paul, haven't we, boys?" Big kid turned the radio to another station. The other two turned out their pockets in front of Jack, and out fell coins, 3 chocolate bars, a set of spanners, and a can of pea soup. And the kid said, "We pinched all of this from Woolworths. It was real easy. We took them bottles to the bottle-o, but he reckoned the 3 green ones were no good. He said, 'Don't bring them sort no more. We got a quid for the lot.'" And Jack asked, "Where's the money?" And the older kid smirked and gave him some silver. But the youngest one looked worried, and he said to Jack, "We bought some smokes, Jack." And Jack became serious, and he said, "Where are they?" "Here they are, Jack," said the little kid, looking like he was facing the judge to hear sentence. The little kid showed him a crumpled packet of cigarettes. "There's 4 ciggies left, Jack. We saved them for you." He placed them reverently in the old man's top pocket. Jack looked stern. The oldest kid fiddled the radio until he got rock and roll, and Fagan yelled, "Leave it on 2GB. Jack Fagan. They're both the same person. Jack, I call Fagan sometimes, because he was like Fagan in Oliver Twist. Fagan said, "I want to hear Pussy and Charlie in a minute." That was a local radio show. Frank danced around miming the rock song. "Turn it back," the old bloke screamed. The little kid got off the mattress and switched it back. Big Frank made like to hit him, and the little one flinched, and Jack snarled, "Bloody leave him alone, smart ass, or you can piss off out of here." Frank looked rebellious, but he didn't answer back. And Jack told me little Paulie had escaped Gosford Boys' Home, and the coppers were looking for him. "And this bugger is Robbie the Robber," he said. "Best shoplifter in Australia. You watch him and you'll learn a bit." I told him about McGill Boys' Home that I'd been in. I wanted their respect, so I volunteered the crimes I'd done and added a couple more. And little Paulie described Gosford. I pitied anyone put in there. Gosford made my McGill seem like a holiday camp, and little Paulie had escaped. I was impressed, and I told him, and he beamed with joy. Next day I applied for the dole. It took 6 weeks to get your first cheque mailed to your house, and I think Jack kept it when it came because I never saw it. 18-year-olds didn't get much anyway. During the day, the kids and me would shoplift, but not like professionals. We're just looking for candy and chocolate and stuff like that. But when alone, I kept my distance from the kids and began looking for houses to break into. But Sydney people looked so tough that I changed my mind.